right, guys, Vice Debates is back, and this time it's not about feminism, it's not about racism, it's about colorism. Let's get into it. Young Apollo with the Okay, we're doing another Vice Debates. These often get a little spicy. It's a good thing we have Taylor, Nashville Hot Taylor, on the show today.
It's a good thing you drugged me into another contentious conversation about colorism. My straight white male self is very much looking forward to talking about this. Not really.
I honestly can't think of a better person. And speaking of colored people, we also have Cam.
What's up, guys?
You're so white.
Nothing more to be said there, guys. Let's get into this Vice debate. It's titled Minorities Debate, Skin Bleaching, Appropriation, and Colorism. Let's watch.
That is a very clear experience and example of colorism. Like, it is real. It happens.
When
like,
you're lighter, people treat you differently.
Like, that's what I think this conversation really needs to center on. Why is it societally that being lighter skinned has very clear material advantages?
In the future.
Okay, it says Vice invited people of color from across the country to discuss colorism. For those of you who are like, what the hell is colorism? So it's different than racism. Colorism can happen, in and amongst different races where you're actually judged based on the lightness or the darkness of your skin tone. A lot of people say it's preferable to be of a lighter skin tone because you're going to get preferential treatment, you're treated better, people are more intrigued by you, you get more opportunities, and that is this idea of colorism. We'll see if it goes in the opposite direction during this talk, although I have a feeling if we have a lot of progressives on this debate, it will not go in the other direction, meaning that Black people can also be colorist towards, lighter skinned people.
Oh, far. A lot of pink today. Hello, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today. My name is Alexis Johnson. I'm a correspondent with Vice News, and I'll also be acting as our moderator for today's panel. We first want to put out the disclaimer that, we've done our best to get you all here today of different ethnicities, different shades, different skin tones to talk about this topic, but we realize we can't represent everybody in this discussion, okay? Today, we're going to be discussing a topic that,
He is beautiful. He looks like a little model. Look at the hair.
Brown-skinned Black woman moving throughout the world. It's something that I think about a lot. It's something that I hear being discussed a lot, both in real life, online, in the media. Today, we're here to talk about colorism. What is colorism and how do you define it?
I gave my definition.
Hi, my name is Koa and I identify as biracial. I think about colorism as...
I identify as biracial? You just are biracial. This is a weird thing when I hear people talk about race to be like, I identify as Iraqi or I identify as Indian. No, you don't. You are. You just are that. But by the way.
As a distinct hierarchy that is anchored in a proximity to whiteness.
Interesting. I think colorism is internalized racism. I'm Calvin West, and I am an American.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Maya. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm Black. So I actually think that colorism existed before racism, and the fact that historically, for example, if you look at Europe or Asia, like serfs, peasants, people who were in the lower classes had to work and toil in the sun, and those who were royalty or aristocrats or whatever tend to be lighter skin, and so there has historically been a privileging of lighter skin over darker skinned individuals. But I think that with the onset of global white supremacy fueled by European colonialism, 1492 onward, it was then absorbed into racism.
Yeah, colonialism, European colonialism, it was just 1492 onward. Didn't exist before, we don't have to worry about that. She is right in a lot of what she said historically. If you look at India and their system, their very old school system of the hierarchy of skin color, with the darkest people being noted as the untouchables, there is a very clear and distinct difference in the way that people of different shades are treated historically in many different countries. So that's something to talk about. I'm wondering if we're ever going to get into any discussions of it happening in the opposite direction. I'll leave it open. Hopefully they do.
Yeah, I completely agree as well. I identify as Iranian, as someone who's from like an Asian country.
I identify as Iranian. What?
That wasn't technically colonized. We even have colorism in that idea, even without people coming in and telling us that. So it's almost like a preconceived idea that's in our heads.
I'm a mixed race Puerto Rican, and in the Latina community, you can understand it very much as a caste system where there is no shame to address darker skinned people by slurs.
Okay. There are personal consequences for colorism. There are also systemic consequences, and colorism has implications for public health, beauty, and all sorts of things in society.
Okay. So you said that you feel like it is internalized racism?
The blackest experience any black person can have is another black person telling them that they aren't black. And that is something that happens to lighter-skinned black people, because there's this idea and that I've lived a different life because I'm a lighter skin. And that, to me, is the most anti-black thing you can do to anybody.
I have a feeling that he's going to be our conservative opinion on this specific topic so far, just based off what he said, because he says, I'm getting invalidated because I'm a lighter skinned black person and being told that my experience isn't black enough. So I have a feeling that he's going to be on the outskirts.
He also introduced himself as an American, if you noticed that, which I thought was definitely a tell that he is a seething racist America! In this panel.
He's anti-black.
What are your thoughts on that? Sorry, I saw you had a little bit of a reaction.
Oh,
there.
me?
Yeah.
So I think often when lighter-skinned people talk about experiencing bias from darker-skinned people, I think that my first thought is just like, remember that colorism is an ism. And like when something has that ISM, it means institutional power plus prejudice. Darker-skinned people.
What? When a word has ism at the end of it, it means institutionalized power. Wait, I want to hear exactly what she said again. Exactly what she said.
Just like remember that colorism is an ism. And like when something has that ISM, it means institutional power plus prejudice.
No! God, please, no!
Who? Institutional power? Who said that? Where did you guys learn that in school? That if something has ism at the end of it, that's what that means?
Oh yeah, when I learned about botulism in biology class, that's exactly what they told us.
Yeah, you know what? Like skepticism, cynicism, agnosticism, like all these different. There's so many. Yeah,
autism.
Yeah,
like, these are all systems with institutional power.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. I get what she's trying to say. She's trying to throw it in the camp of like colorism, racism, feminism, misogyny. You know, like it just doesn't. That does not make sense, and it is very much not true. And what is really unfortunate about that is you're going to hear that a lot, that if something has an ism at the end of it, it means it's part of an institution or a system of power and privilege. That is absolutely false. That has never, ever been something that we've truly taught people up until the past 5-10 years. That is not true, guys. Not true.
Darker-skinned people as a class of people do not have the ability, the institutional power to, for example, put you in prison for longer sentences because of being lighter skinned or, having less access to employment. There's actual statistics where like a darker-skinned person with a master's degree usually has less employment opportunities or is less employable than a lighter-skinned person who has a bachelor's. And it's not to say that like bullying is I know that hurts. Like it's like personal sentiment. I know that actually feels bad. But I think that it's important to remember when we're talking about whether racism or colorism or anything that's an ism, that there's an element of institutional power that is added on to the prejudice.
This is like a little game that we play where we attach it to power and privilege so that you invalidate the lived experiences of other people. So he said, I've been told that I'm not black enough. And they go, well, you're light skinned, so it doesn't even matter. Even though you are black, you are light skinned black. Therefore, you benefit from power and privilege, which makes your personal experience invalid. You cannot share that. We do not care about that. It's no longer colorism because you are represented in a group of people that have power. And it makes little to no sense considering, one, that guy is black, but two, that people who are considered powered and privileged often go through these experiences of being directly judged and experiencing pure prejudice and discrimination based on their skin color. It happens all the time. And if we're not going to validate the experiences of everyone who has evidence and proof that they've undergone an experience like this, then you don't really care about colorism. You only care about victimization and upholding that victimization.
I do feel like when darker skinned people express their frustration to lighter skinned people, that their lives might be different, harder. I think you sort of have to acknowledge your privilege, you know, or else it's very ignorant. Even though we're both Black.
What specifically does that mean? Like, I've had experiences in my life that have not been great. And I can assume that it's because of the color of my skin, right? We talk about these ideologies, right? Which I think we get lost in sometimes. And we have to just bring it back to reality of like, well, let's talk about your situation for a second.
Right.
How has it affected you specifically? And the answers that you get are, I didn't get an apartment, I didn't get a job, I didn't get that promotion, which happens to everybody, right? They can always talk about somebody else and what's happened in history, but they can't talk about their own lived experiences. And that's important.
I have plenty lived experiences. I mean, we could go from like, for me, I'm in the beauty industry, the beauty world, so I get invited to influencer events, and if I look around and I'm the darkest Black person, there's still a problem there.
BFFR. You are not the darkest person at beauty influencer events. BFFR. I love, personally, makeup, MUAs, all this stuff. There are plenty of makeup artists who are my skin tone, beauty influencers who are my skin tone, and far, far darker. If anything, it is super incentivized right now to release makeup and to sponsor beauty influencers who are of diverse backgrounds and skin tones. It is elevated if you are a Black person in this industry. Nobody's putting out makeup lines anymore where they really don't have shades for Black people for the most part. And that was a problem of the past. And we can talk about that being a problem of the past, but it needs to be acknowledged that there are plenty of Black people within these industries, and in the beauty industry in particular. That's a glass ceiling that has been broken as far as I'm concerned. I find it very hard to believe that this man is saying he's the darkest Black person. And again, look at him very quickly. It's like Meghan Markle saying I'm the darkest Black person in London. It's the same.
You know what I mean? That's a perfect example of that. And you might not realize it, but white people, lighter skinned people, they might be more willing to approach you because you are of lighter skin. That's another, sure.
Might be. Might. Everything might be racist if you look into it hard enough. Everything might be colorism. Every missed opportunity that I've ever, skipped out on or lost out on in my life could be due to colorism and racism, but that doesn't mean that it is. And we make this big jump from could be to is.
Personal thing have you realized that?
Yes, I can acknowledge that may be the thing. Here's the other thing that happens. The other side of that, the other perspective on that is that I've done a lot of things in the acting world. I've missed roles because I'm not dark enough. And there's a lot of Black people who don't know that. They have no idea that your skin tone is actually highly sought out for.
But I feel like that's acting. They're looking to fill a specific role, whereas if you're just applying for a job,
it's everywhere.
A lighter skinned person might get that opportunity over a darker skinned person.
I get so many personal testimonials from young dark skinned Black girls who are very detailed about how colorism affects their life. So obviously colorism is a systemic issue, but I think an important part of it is the personal battle like young Black girls endure. These girls are being bullied. Some are as young as 14, 13 years old, having really mental health crises in middle school. There's also so much research about how colorism shows up systemically. There's research on public health and the different health outcomes darker skinned Black people have as opposed to lighter skinned.
Whoa. How is that evidence of colorism? There's so many different things that could go into that. Again, we take in all this data and we go, well, dark-skinned people or Black people are affected more than lighter-skinned people are. Therefore, racism. There's so many other factors that could be, influencing that outcome.
Black people. And there's one about pulse oximeters being used during COVID and how the devices have a harder time registering darker skin. And you can imagine the implications for that. And we know that the Black community has been disproportionately affected by COVID.
Okay, if pulse oxes aren't reading dark skin, that's not an example of like direct systemic colorism. It's just something that needs to be updated and worked on. And you can still, get pulse and oxygen on people who can't read those on their fingers. So certainly, if this is a systemic problem, as you're making it out to be, then yeah, pulse ox machines need to be fixed. I can tell you, I've worked a lot with pulse ox machines prior to working here at PragerU, and I've never had the issue of a pulse ox machine not reading a Black patient. But that is just my own personal anecdotal experiences. I can't speak to that on a larger scale. As far as Black people being disproportionately affected by COVID, yeah, they're also like disproportionately affected by obesity in this country. And a lot of that is due to lifestyle choices. We can talk about socioeconomic status and things like that, but that's not a direct route to colorism and people who are directly discriminating against you because of the way that you look. A lot of this can be solved, or at least discussed, if we choose to have the discussion and not just blame it on colorism.
In terms of like deaths, I don't think that evidence can be divorced from the anecdotes, because the anecdotes just supplement that evidence. They help put that evidence into context. And I'm so fascinated by the growing scholarship around colorism, because I think it's about time people treat colorism with the same seriousness they treat racism.
Lamar, what are your thoughts?
When you come with statistics like that, that's the kind of supporting arguments that we need, as opposed to kind of moving away from the anecdotal, in my opinion, right? Because we're talking about something so big and so huge that affects everyone who is alive. I'm in the middle, colorism exists for sure. I just think there's a lot of confirmation bias in our personal experiences that might drive us right to that term when it could be a number of other things.
Right. But she's talking about how particularly darker skinned women engage with structures, engage with power, engage with institutions. Per that exact point, there are continuing studies that show that in instances in which darker skinned women do report intimate partner violence, domestic partner violence, bruises on their body, strangulation marks are harder for police to see, nurses to see, physicians to see, because a lot about how they are trained and the way they interact with those victims are attuned to look for those marks on lighter skin tones. And so that also impacts a lot in terms of who is seen as the victim, who gets resources, who gets proper medical attention. A lighter skinned woman who presents like I do, who walks in with something that reads very clean cut, is likely to get more attention in an already deeply misogynistic and racist and sexist body than a woman who is much darker than I am.
Whoa. Whoa. That's a huge claim to make. Okay, first of all, the reality is, if I walk into a doctor's office with a huge bruise across my face or bruise across my neck, and somebody who's 10, 15 shades darker than me walks to the same doctor's office, of course it's going to be harder to tell that they have bruises on them. Of course, obviously. That doesn't make the system colorist. And you know what? When you're talking about engaging with systems, you can communicate these things. You can say, I have a bruise here, or I'm affected in this way, or, there's a laceration here. I know it's hard to see, but because of my skin tone, but there it is. I mean, this is going to be a reality regardless of what you do. And of course, clinicians and medical practitioners should be good at reading all skin tones and checking in on these things, but also we need to be good at communicating that these things are happening to us. It can't be all on a doctor or a physician to be able to recognize things that to anybody's human eye would be difficult to recognize when compared to a lighter skinned person. Wow.
So they seem to have presented a lot of evidence and studies. Are you changing your mind at all?
As well as self-made testimony, as well as anecdotal evidence. It goes back to how you feel about yourself.
I feel like it sounds like you're saying racism is like a choice almost.
How you respond to racism is, absolutely. And I know that that's uncomfortable, and I love it. This is my wheelhouse, trust me. How you respond to racism is a choice.
I'm hearing, particularly on this side of the room.
On this side of the room? You mean from this one guy? Like the language is just so like cushioned and blanketed, and I'm hearing particularly from this side of the room from about 6'2" individual human being with a soul, body, and mind who may or may not be male. You're hearing from this guy.
This idea that you can make an individual choice outside of the context of history, culture, politics, structures. I don't believe that personally. I think when anybody buys a certain product, styles themselves a certain way, decides to not style themselves a certain way, read a certain book, use certain words in a job interview, approach a politician, I think all of that is informed by history, literally all of the time.
Let me pause for a second. So, I mean, like, in a philosophical sense, what she's saying is absolutely right. Like, everything that you do now is informed by the past, what you've been exposed to, you know, different prerequisites and things that you've been able to gain through your life experience and the life experience of others. And it goes on and on and on and on till you get back to, you know, the beginning of human civilization. So in a sense, what she's saying is right. But what she's trying to say is that you can never divorce these systems and the choices made within these systems from the, you know, the foundations of them or the racial paths of these systems. And that would be absolutely wrong. But it's neither here nor there. Taylor, were you going to say something?
Yeah, it's just a whole mentality that is built to keep you held down as an individual and to keep you thinking about the ways in which you're oppressed, the ways in which nothing that you do or nothing that you have at your disposal as an individual person can overcome and assert yourself in the world and make a life that's good for yourself. And you're a total prisoner of the history, you're a total prisoner of the system, of the racist, you know, patriarchal society that we live in, and you're just stuck. And you know, I just want to ask these people, like, what's the solution? Because all I'm hearing is, but boogeyman's still under the bed, but boogeyman's still under the bed. And it's like, let's turn the lights on and look at some facts, look at what you do have the power to do as an individual. Let's look at the evidence that supports the claims that you're making, and let's have a serious discussion. But every time, like this guy, he keeps trying to make a point about, hey, well, you're in control. You have a little bit of control of how you respond to this, of what you're going to do about it, of how you're going to think. But he gets shot down immediately by everyone else in the room who's like, yeah, but systems, yeah, but power, yeah, but history, yeah, but all these structures. And this way of thinking is just like it's a ceiling above your head and above your life that you will never overcome, because you're always focused on proving to people that boogeyman's under the bed, when let's be adults, you know, let's not be children here. Let's turn the lights on and let's deal with things. If we can identify specific areas, specific issues, specific structures or people who are racist, engaging in these racist practices or colorism, then yes, let's deal with those. Let's talk about them.
Right.
But if we make them the center of our universe and the only way that we can ever respond to someone saying, hey, well, here's maybe my path forward in life as an individual is, yeah, but you're held back by these structures, that's not getting you anywhere.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not going to accuse these specific people of being part of this camp, but it's almost like you don't want the issue to go away, because then your crutch is gone. Like, you have nothing to cripple yourself anymore. If these issues, you know, if these issues go away and we can no longer talk about them, then you have no excuse for where you are at in life. And it seems as though everybody who's sitting here is pretty successful. So, like, what are we even talking about?
Yeah, well, just to add on that, I think when you have put being an activist against this racist system as like an integral part of your identity, of how you find meaning and how you create value for yourself as a person. It's like that story that you're telling yourself is, I live in this racist structure, and the way that I find meaning in life is by fighting against it. And if that racist structure doesn't exist or isn't as real as you think it is, then your brain is going to filter out evidence against that, because you need it to be true in order to justify and rationalize this belief and this story that you've staked your life on. And that's, I mean, the same, I know about this because I come from a hyper religious background where you need things to be true. And that comes at the expense of your ability to think critically and to be your true self and be free to and think about if these people, I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant here, but think about if these people weren't held back by this ideology, like what could they be focusing on? What value could they be creating in the world? But instead it's all just about proving to themselves and proving to everyone else that we need to have these conversations. We need to talk about this. We need to describe the ways in which we're oppressed. We need to look at all the different structures and all this stuff. And that's all it ever is. There's never anything beyond that. And it's just unfortunate to see, and that it is ultimately sort of limiting to themselves.
Yeah, and it's like hopping on to what you said. It's like it's not even to invalidate that these things exist, or that like the ideas which you've founded this ideology on exist. Colorism exists. People do judge people based off the color of their skin, and some people do give preferential treatment to lighter skinned people. Okay. So what? Now what? Like, can we acknowledge? Do we move on? There seems to just be no moving on from the point. And it's always, again, I say colorism exists. I'm talking about like on an individual level. I'm not talking about some sort of systemic, foundational, institutionalized issue that everybody's dealing with on a day-to-day basis. I'm saying that, yeah, sometimes people make judgments of other people based on what their skin tone looks like. Are those people particularly intelligent? No. So why are you bothering with these people, and why are you letting it consume every part of who you are as a person?
I want to talk about anybody's individual experiences of it unless it's an experience that is affected by colorism in the way that you guys are comfortable with it. Colorism also happens on the other end. When I talk about the internalized racism and how lighter skinned voices, they don't get heard, they don't get pushed out there within the Black community, that I get eye rolls, I get, people. There's a reaction to that is very negative and not welcoming. And
I'm not in the business of denying people their lived experiences. Like, who am I?
But I'm probably going to deny your lived experience that you just said. Oh, let's hear. Let's wait. I may be wrong, and she might not do it, but I feel like she is going to invalidate what he just said.
But I think we can also acknowledge that those things happen. Like, lighter skinned people have like certain experiences where they feel invalidated because of their complexion. And we can also...
can you acknowledge that colorism affects lighter skinned people?
There's no such thing as reverse colorism. Same way there's no such thing as reverse racism, reverse sexism,
So I'm not trying to invalidate any of your lived experiences of colorism, but colorism does not happen to you and you cannot experience it. And she did nod for those of you who maybe didn't see her. So do you see? They don't really care about the issue. They don't really care about the issue. They care about their own victimization and the own, chess piece that they play within what is a larger game of just crippling yourself and making you feel like you are oppressed at every turn in your life. They do not care when it happens to other people. They do not care to defend other people who are maybe actually falling victim to what it is that they're complaining about and talking about. But like I said, we knew that. We knew that to be the case.
Reversism, that's what I believe.
Okay, that's your opinion. I respect it. That's your opinion.
Agree in the sense that the experiences you're talking about that circulate around like all this coded language of like, you're not actually Black, or you're not Black enough, or like, quantifying.
Which also happens with white people.
I just want to finish speaking.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to add to your point. Go ahead.
I have experienced versions of that myself, and I do not consider that to be colorism. Colorism is distinctly about a system and resources and visibility and autonomy within those systems.
Invalidate based on our own definition. Even though you're using our own definition to talk about your own experiences, you're not, it's not part of a power system. It's not part of some sort of privilege hierarchy. So everything that you experience, moving on.
Like, to add on with...
You gonna say something, Taylor?
Yeah, just the irony that this is a panel discussing colorism, and what she's saying to this guy, your experience of being a victim of actual colorism doesn't count because you're in the wrong place on the power structure. And we're effectively not talking about colorism. We're talking about power dynamics. We're talking about a worldview that judges everything based on the color of your skin, which is ironically itself kind of is colorism. So it's funny, like your value as a human being, the validity of your experience hinges on the color of your skin. Well, what is that if not colorism?
Right. Exactly. They've become the very thing they claim to hate.
She said, like, about the whole bullying and things, like, that actually does happen. Like, I've been bullied just for, well, I consider myself as brown skin, but back then I was like really dark skin, and I did lighten up like probably 2 shades, maybe 3 shades because of it.
Can you tell me why you started to bleach your skin?
It's like you growing up in school, you have mainly guys making fun of your skin color and calling you charcoal, calling you dark. So growing up, you just start to feel like, oh, okay, so okay, no one likes me because of my skin color. Like, okay, I see. So that kind of does something to your head, you feel me? And also we have social media. They do praise lighter skinned women, Latinas, whatever, pale skinned women. So that kind of makes you feel like you're not desired, you feel me? So, and that's why I started bleaching my skin. That's why I started skin lightening because of it, you know? And you know, people that do buy my stuff, like, they do tell me that it's helping them feel more confident. And I know it's kind of sad, but it's like, that's the society we live in now.
So when you say when people buy your stuff, can you talk about your business and what it is that you sell?
I sell skin bleaching cream. Pretty controversial, I know, but I do have negative comments. People saying you hate yourself, you wish you were white, this and this and that, you're a follower, like, just a lot of stuff, but I don't really like listen to it. I really don't care. I guess how society sees dark women, like we're basically the losing team. Like, who wants to be on the losing team?
She's mad confusing me a little bit. So she got bullied in school for being dark and then lightened her skin and bleached her skin. And now she sells skin bleaching products to other women. And on its face, I know a lot of people will hear that, and particularly Black people, and go like, oh, I cannot believe she's selling skin bleaching products, but they don't hold the same energy when people are selling tanners to white girls, or people are getting nose jobs or face filler, or, you know, wearing makeup. They don't care about that. And that's direct changing of your appearance, sometimes under the knife. But skin bleaching is such a horrible thing because it's something that Black people are doing to appear lighter. And that's part of a system, right? And it's part of power and privilege that's baked into an institution. So that's extra wrong. But when people tan, it's not wrong. When people wear makeup, it's not wrong. When people change their entire nose for the rest of their life, that's not wrong. So hopefully they don't come at her any type of way, although I anticipate that's what's going to happen. It really just sounds like you got bullied in school, which this happens to everybody. Think of anything that you do to change your appearance on any given day, or anything that you have done in the past to change your appearance. It's because somebody made you feel insecure about it, and you went and you changed it. It's no different than some of the women who are probably wearing makeup right now on this panel, or maybe if somebody's got a nose job on this panel. It's really not that different.
I felt like lighter skin women, they were more desired and they get away with more and they have more privileges than I did. And also, I also thought that personally, I also thought I looked prettier lighter. And for me, I honestly I don't think it's a big deal because I feel like people want to be darker and people want to be lighter. So
Yep. There's people who want to move to both sides of the never-ending spectrums of beauty, and trends come in and trends come out. I mean, look at Kim Kardashian and all these celebrities who are taking weight loss shots because now it's suddenly in to be skinny again, even though, you know, thousands of women went down to Miami and Mexico and got BBLs and came back to the United States because they wanted to be slim, thick, and all this stuff, but that's out now. Body trends shift, change. Our own personal perceptions of ourselves shift and change. And some people will do whatever it takes at any given moment to fit a certain perception that they have of what is beautiful. Now, should she be judged more for bleaching her skin than people who do all of the other beauty trends and things that happen? No, not in my opinion.
I don't see why it's such a taboo. I'm not ashamed of it because I kind of see the hypocrisy in it.
Being a lighter person, I do experience a tremendous amount of privilege, and I'm not denying that of you at all. I think what upset me about the skin bleaching is that a lot of mothers do it to their daughters, and from my own experience, sometimes your parents do it to you, and you don't have the consent of the child, or someone like me could end up much lighter than I was in my childhood and kind of have an identity issue. And it's just, for me, it's a matter of consent.
And also, I feel like you have to ask yourself, what's the goal? You know, the goal is to end colorism, racism. I feel like you changing your skin tone is just feeding into the cycle.
Why do you have foundation on and blush and eyeshadow? Because you look prettier than the average human being looks. Your skin looks a lot smoother because of the foundation you're wearing than other people's skin looks. Don't you want to get rid of the stigma of textured skin and how people are affected by the way that their skin looks? Shouldn't you take all that off? Why are you perpetuating a system that you claim to be against if you care for people's inner beauty and what they look like naturally? Do you see how that's not making sense? And how people can just like make their own choices for their beauty and how they look and what they want to look like and how they want to be presented to the world.
Right. Everyone should be
Yeah.
free to express themselves and present themselves to the world in the way that makes them feel best. Now, the problem from my point of view is you don't want to be doing things to yourself because of insecurities. That's a generally unhealthy thing as a person. But that's, to me, what to focus on is like, am I insecure about my appearance for unhealthy reasons, or am I trying to optimize my appearance for the world, work the best with what I have, and put the best version of myself that makes me feel good and confident out into the world? And that's a very personal question as to whether that's rooted in whether what you're doing is rooted in insecurity or whether it's rooted in just taking care of yourself as best that you can. But that's the conversation and the part of it that we should focus on, not, are you betraying your race or are you participating in it? Because then it's just this endless cycle, and there's no way to do all of that without being hypocritical, as you just pointed out.
Yeah, and this might be a hot take, but 9 times out of 10, people are doing anything that they do to their bodies out of insecurity. And I don't care if it's something that's particularly healthy for your body, like you're eating right and going to the gym and all these things. These things are great and good for you, but 9 times out of 10, people are doing it because they're insecure about themselves. And that's something to acknowledge. You don't just go wear makeup because you're not insecure about yourself. And I say this, I wear makeup every single day. You don't just go to the gym because you're not insecure about yourself. And it's very hard to divorce yourself of insecurities. So while it's not something that we should encourage people to do, it's literally what everybody's doing all the time. All the time.
I think making money off of that is very kind of shady.
You making money off of the beauty industry is really shady. If you're going to call her out and say that she's making money off of skin bleaching, that's shady. You being a beauty influencer is super shady, and you should stop doing it because you're perpetuating false narratives. Some people don't have the capability of buying makeup and putting it on their face. Some people are disabled to the point where they can't apply makeup anymore. Some people have cystic acne and are struggling with that, and they want to be able to show their skin. And because you put on foundation, you're making their skin sort of they're looking down upon themselves. They're looking at something that's unachievable to themselves. So what you're doing is shady. You see how it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't.
Some people just personally feel like they look better lighter, just like some people feel like they look better with makeup on. Why not you just tell everybody, love your natural skin. You don't need makeup.
Not being systemically oppressed from not wearing makeup, though.
Really? Because I can think of people complaining about beauty, about pretty privilege and beauty privileges and all this stuff, and women in the feminist movement complaining that if they don't wear makeup, they're told that they're not looking after themselves or that they're not putting in effort. So based on a lot of leftist dogma and progressive thinking, people are systemically oppressed due to not having access to makeup or not having a willingness to put on makeup. So again, if we're gonna make the argument that she's doing something wrong by selling skin bleaching products or by bleaching her skin, you have to be consistent. And they're not being consistent. And guess what? It's because they wear makeup. It's because when they go out on Saturday night after filming this show, they're gonna put on mascara and foundation and blush in front of the mirror. And we can never be critical of things that we're doing ourselves, because we are the bastions of truth and light and everything good and progressive. We could have never done something wrong to perpetuate a system.
Someone with darker skin might experience systemic racism.
It's hypocrisy, though.
That's
what I'm trying to say.
Hypocrisy.
And that's not fair.
And I also don't think we can just ignore that there's such a terrible history of racism and colorism, and that's why it's a bigger deal to people when people are bleaching their skin versus when people are putting on makeup. And
there's a terrible history of women being killed for not being beautiful. ending up alone in life for not being beautiful, being devalued by society based on whatever the beauty standard is of the time. It doesn't work. The argument is for naught. Just acknowledge it.
Yeah. I think for me, when it comes to skin bleaching, I'm a lot less interested in the personal experience and more just like, why is this a multi-billion-dollar industry? Like, why is Dove, something in the US that, they just sell bar soaps here, but in Asia, they literally are selling skin bleaching, Asia and Africa, the Caribbean. Like, we need to talk about how this is like a capitalist enterprise that is invested in people lightening their skin.
That's
like, that to me, like, I think that's why it's important to like remember like who benefits from people lightening their skin. Like, I think the conversations, like, we need to talk about class and capitalism along this as well.
I'm not coming around saying that like I'm pro skin bleaching or whatever, all this stuff. What about the billion-dollar industry that surgery is and plastic surgery is in this country? All of our respective countries have beauty trends that we adhere to like no other, religiously adhere to. In Korea, girls are running around getting, their chins sharpened and trying to look lighter in the face. Here in the United States, you have women who are, anorexic or getting lipo, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, getting BBLs. There's tons of beauty standards all over the world that people are in a rat race to adhere to at any given moment. And just to boil this down to saying, well, skin bleaching is wrong because, colorism, it just doesn't work for me. It really is not working for me.
So why does makeup get a pass when it's literally the same concept?
You're internalizing the idea that being lighter skinned is prettier. And I get why. Like, obviously, like, I'm very privy to the societal pressures that would drive one to skin bleach. So I'm not trying to judge, but
but you are, though. You are, though. You are. And we just have to own that. Let's just own it.
I don't know what I'm judging. I literally acknowledge that. I understand.
She literally just told that woman she has internalized racism and then is like, I'm not judging. What do you mean I judged her? I just called her a racist, but what do you mean? What do you mean I'm judging her? See, it's this just like kumbaya leftism. I can't.
Why, like, skin bleaching is a thing. I have like a lot of family that skin bleaches. I'm not sitting here pretending like, oh, just love yourself, blah, 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 like, or even questioning that you like don't love yourself. Like, I understand there are so many pressures that would make someone want to bleach their skin in the first place. I just think that it is a consequence of like internalized, like anti-Blackness. Like, you've internalized something, and it's not to say that it's your fault. It's just like we live in a world and we absorb the various messages, and we are all impressionable.
So a Black woman or a white woman who goes, I want to look like Beyonce, Cardi B, Meg Thee Stallion, Nicki Minaj, and goes under the knife with Dr. Miami to get a BBL, is she internalizing pro-Blackness? Like, what is going on there?
I don't have much to add, but I do think that what I would like for this conversation to do is less of focusing on like your personal experience of skin bleaching in the business and more of just like you as someone who like had a lived experience of being darker skinned, like you saw, and like you like had like the material experience of like receiving discrimination and like feeling less desirable. And like once your skin became lighter, like it opened up opportunities and doors for you. I think that that's what this conversation needs to focus on.
Yes.
Of just like actual, like that is a very clear experience and example of colorism. Like it is real. It happens.
When
like,
you're lighter, yeah, people treat you differently.
Like that's
They
what I think this
really
conversation
do.
really needs to center on. Why is it societally that being lighter skinned has very clear material advantages of both beauty, desirability, romantic relationships, socioeconomic opportunities? Like this is real.
Who here has had pressure from their mother or their family, or have heard those messages from within the household about colorism, and who wants to share that experience?
So I think one of the experiences of colorism that has stuck with me, and I know that like my mother, of course, like she said this offhandedly, but you know, as a child, like that's something that's rooted in you. But I remember one time and she was just like, you don't need to marry somebody that's like your shade or darker. Like your kids are going to come out too dark.
Horrible.
And I just remember being like, damn, like, is there something wrong with me?
moving here after 9/11, there was a huge push, I think, in the Middle Eastern community to look as white as possible. So it wasn't necessarily that it was the beauty standard, but rather a way to not get hate crimed or to kind of stay under the radar. And so my mom would tell me things like, tell people you're Russian and things like that. So kind of like keeping a proximity to whiteness was seen as a safer idea.
Ella?
For me, in my family dynamic, it didn't come down to skin as so much as hair politics. So my hair, when I was a child, was very thick and straight, like a tapestry of hair. And then it got curly with puberty. And as my hair got curly, my mom, without discussion, stepped in with the executive decision that we would be straightening my hair. There was an assessment made on me as a child and then as a younger woman of like, oh, like you're almost there. Like if we can control your hair, if we can get your hair a certain texture, you could be mistaken for white.
I'm sorry. I'm going to be honest with you, and this might just be me. I would never mistake this woman for anything else but white. Like, there's no like, oh, you're right on the borderline of being like, I wish I could, you know, make my child look as white as possible. She looks white. It's straight up the Meghan Markle effect. Like, Meghan Markle is not being confused for, you know, this hardcore, like, black woman. She's really not. And again, this might just be my own personal perception, and some of you guys might put in the comments like, yeah, I would have said that she was mixed race. Where? Literally where? Where are you seeing black on this woman? And her hair is curly. I don't know that this is the same curl pattern she had when she hit puberty and all this stuff. It could have been much curlier or whatever. But there is nothing about her that, for me, would scream anything other than white. And she's not white. She's biracial. So, I mean, that's just, you know, the way she turned out, and that's how she grew up, and that's fine. And that's the interesting thing about all of this race stuff is that, like, it's so shiftable, and just like so many people exist within these different colors of like blackness and mixed and Puerto Rican, and you know there's just so much so many different colors and shades existing within this. It's just hard to pin down and have a direct conversation. That's why so much of anecdotal experiences and I was treated like this, or I lost this opportunity, is being brought in. And who's ever going to truly know? Unless somebody said, I did this to you because of your skin color. It's really hard to tell. Most of these people are within the camp of being black. They're talking about being discriminated against by Hispanics, by white people, by people within their own race. It's a lot of just personal experience and things. It's a really tough conversation to pin down. And like I said, it does exist. Certainly colorism exists. But it's just a tough thing to even ask, like, what do you want to do about it? Because right now we have diverse people in movies, we have diverse beauty influencers, as this guy was saying the opposite, even though we very much do. Diverse people on the internet. We're living in very diverse communities for the most part. So what else is there to do about it? Because we're all socializing with each other. We're all, you know, getting to certain spaces of success, despite the inherent discrimination that is apparently built into this country.
And that reflects well on us.
Anybody else want to share their experience of colorism from their families?
When I was younger, my little brothers were much like lighter than me. So I think at a very early age, I understood that society ascribed like lightness to like femininity and like darkness to masculinity. I think a lot of what I struggled with when I was younger was like blaming myself and like not like being confused as to why I was being treated differently. So when I was old enough to understand what colorism was and how many systems are at play, and that it really has nothing to do with me and everything to do with how people like are conditioned, I think it was liberating for me. That really helped me start thinking of myself as beautiful.
That's good.
For me, many would probably
because she's gorgeous, by the way. Like, there's no question about that. I don't
assume that my parent like pushed it on me, but it's definitely the opposite. Like my mom, she always tells me that I'm beautiful. Like, even when I was darker, she always told me I was beautiful. She never said I had to use cream or use anything to lighten my skin. I just got influenced by the media, honestly.
Yeah, I have a similar experience. My mom, she really embraced my hair, told me it was beautiful, and encouraged me to grow it. But I just remember watching like TV, Disney Channel, and all of these things and asking, why can't my hair look like that? Why can't it be straight? So for me, it's the same. I saw more through the media, but I was still getting that support from my family, that, you know, that encouragement.
That's good, because that's the way that life is supposed to be. In your life, especially as a young child in these like formative years, you are going to see so much that is a complete descent away from everything that you're taught in terms of your family's value structure and what is taught to be important to you from your mom and dad. There's going to be so much to influence you in the opposite direction. And what mom and dad do is go, yeah, I know you saw a lot of kids with straight hair on the TV, but guess what? You have curly hair, and that's super cool. And if you want to be on TV one day, you could be on TV too with your curly hair. And, you know, even if you want proof, here's change the channel. Here's a character with curly hair, which did exist at the time this young man was growing up, by the way. And it wasn't, not every single character on Disney Channel had straight hair. And I say that as somebody who is probably close in proximity to age and was growing up watching Disney Channel as well. So that's what happens in life. In life, you're going to be exposed to so many different things that are completely opposite of what you're taught or what you've been known to value. And then you just have to look at that and go, oh yeah, okay. And then recenter yourself. It's really that easy. And if you go around, like when I went around in school, some kids called me like Oreo. You're mixed, you're black and white. Oreo, ha ha ha, so funny. Some thought it was endearing, some thought it was cute. And you go, okay, yeah, that's funny. Black and white, Oreo cookie, black and white. And then you go on about your day. Am I like gonna sit here and be like, when I was a kid, the kids called me an Oreo when I was 5 years old, and I've never lived it down as this colorist experience that I went through? No. Go on about my business.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. I think, you know, what's permeating for me is like information and accessibility to that. I grew up in the Bronx. So like people are around people that look like them for almost their whole lives. And so it's like so embedded that way. It's so embedded, like they stay in the projects forever. And, you know, I managed to leave, like I went out of the hood to get an education, and, you know, and I already didn't look like them because of my fair skin. I'll go back, and I've been having these conversations, these kind of like esoteric seeming conversations that people that I grew up with have never had before.
I think that's interesting. I'm sorry. I gotta be the odd man out again, I guess. What I'm hearing is that because you had a different experience, you think that the people who stayed home, because people just stay home, they don't leave their hometowns, you think that they've been held back because of their race?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I didn't quite understand what she said there, other than that she went out and left the Bronx, and then when she came back, she was having discussions that weren't landing. I feel like they edited out what she was really talking about there.
At all. No, that's not what I said. Racial experience will change depending on where you're located, I think, is all I'm saying. And so people might not have as much of an awareness of how they are different from others if they're in a homogeneous environment. So it isn't until they experience something different and are in an environment of diversity and of different experience that they see, oh, wait, maybe I am of marginalized experience. And then they bring that back and, you know, they can try and pretend like they never saw that, but, you know, and try and integrate back into their home life. But that's impossible. You can't unsee it.
Okay. I mean, I get what she was saying there. I don't know if there's much to unpack.
She's saying when I left my homogenous hometown and went out into the world, then I learned that my experience was oppressed in some way. And when I brought that back, people didn't understand that.
Yeah, she's saying like a lot of these people are growing up in the hood or whatever, and they're surrounded by like blackness, or I think in her case she said she's Puerto Rican, so they're surrounded by other Puerto Ricans, and like they just feel like comfortable in their little space. And then when they go out into the real world where there's actual diversity and there's like white people running around, then they learn how marginalized they are in comparison to other people. I mean, There's not much to say about that. It's just kind of like a subjective.
I mean, related. The only way I can relate to this is, I grew up mostly in a white town, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I mean, there's Black people there too, but the neighborhoods I was in, so culturally homogenous in that way. But I kind of had a different experience because I moved overseas a few different times and spent 3 years of my life before graduating high school in Latin America. And anyways, my only thought on this is, it's really about the values that you are taught as a young person about the other human beings and how to judge their worth. And even though I was ignorant before I left my hometown about, interacting with people from other cultures, I was taught from a very young age that, people are made in the image of God and that we're all equal, and that, we have inalienable rights. We're endowed by our creator with that. And I was never given a sense that you're superior or privileged or anything like that. And so when I came into contact with people from different cultures, different skin tones, whatever, I was just curious and just was able to relate to them as fellow human beings. And, I noticed a lot of different things about them, but I also was fascinated by how the same we are, and how, kids in other countries go through the same things I do. And yet we're in a different setting, and their culture is a little different, and like, what does that look like? And it was just a fascinating process. And anyways, right. I think what she's talking about is going out into the world and not just experiencing other cultures doesn't give you the mentality of oppression. Experiencing an oppression mindset is what gives you that mentality. And then you can bring that back to an otherwise racially neutral environment. And if people don't buy that story because it doesn't resonate with them.
Right. 100%. Like, it's like, yeah, it's like going out and then being told like, oh, this is way worse than you think it is. And like, here's what you're about to go through. And then you're like, what are you talking about? Like, I just got here. And then you're just inundated with this idea by people who are outside of your community that you are lesser than, and that you are going to exist within this hierarchy that you were not privy to before, entering the space. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was a weird statement for me, but yeah. And when you talk about like being in Brazil and like all the kids wanting to touch you and talking about like, there's that little white kid over there and all this stuff, like happens everywhere. People are just like curious, and people will always recognize things that are different than they are, especially if they're growing up in homogenous environments and then stepping outside of them. That's something you need to fortify yourself for, in your mind for, and you need to be able to deal with, rather than like trying to change the way that people naturally are.
Yeah. And just one more thought on that, because my mind goes back to the point about, reverse colorism doesn't exist. And I'm sitting here thinking like, when I went to Brazil, the kids, it's a mixed bag. It's nuanced. Like, on one hand, the girls showed interest in me because I was a different color, so you could call that privilege. But then the boys bullied me because they didn't like that I was getting the attention. I was the last one picked on soccer teams because they knew the white kid can't play soccer. So was that oppression based on my skin color? But that experience isn't validated because, again, it's not the right place on the hierarchy. So that's not actually colorism according to these people. But if it's not, then we need a word for that, because it's something and it's on the basis of skin color. But at the end of the day, I don't care. It's just part of human experience. Yeah, and exactly. I understand that on a very basic level, people treat people differently that are strange or different. And it's just a human thing that we have these tendencies to prefer in-group people or people like us or whatever, or to be fascinated or scared or whatever of people that don't look like us. And that's just something we have to deal with as young people, and decide how we're going to deal with that and navigate that as ourselves, and not let it diminish our sense of self-worth as a human being, not let us become embittered towards society and toward the world. That's where this conversation should live. But instead, I feel like we're just going in circles around, this insistence that colorism is holding people of color back, and that's all we can talk about.
Right. I know like people hate when people say things like this, but like, really, how bad can it be? You guys are sitting on a Vice panel with your new clothes on, fully styled up, like looking your best, talking about these issues. How bad can it be? And just how much time are we wasting going into complaints about this?
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about some of the systems that contribute to colorism, but let's talk about the media and the cultural aspect.
I noticed like there's like an oversaturation of like lighter skinned biracial women who are sort of like meant to be
ruh-roh, just coming from my job,
like the representatives of like Blackness on TV. I also think representation definitely can't fix everything, right? But I think seeing more dark-skinned women in the media, like Lupita Nyong'o, who's just like gorgeous, I was like, well, if she's beautiful, it's like, why do I think like dark skin is ugly?
Why do you, yeah, literally, why do you think dark skin is ugly? Why? What are you talking about? Lupita Nyong'o, Viola Davis, Octavia Spencer, Jennifer Hudson. There's just like, you can rattle off a list of Black women who have become extremely successful in their respective industries, all having to do with media and all front and center for people's eyes and ears. So why? What are you talking about? If anything, Black people are overrepresented in media now.
And I think it becomes frustrating when you feel like you constantly have to wait for representation, like everyone will get representation before you.
And even when we are presented, we're presented as ghetto and loud and like we're not meant to be in a relationship. Like we always like stress our partner out. We're annoying. Like we
Where? What are we talking about? It's just a lot. So much of this is just like anecdotal, this is how I feel type of stuff. We're not getting like any evidence that this is actually the case. I'm not understanding, like, nothing's coming to mind as far as annoying, like, angry Black women represented in media, honestly, unless you're watching BET, because that's the way that women are represented, particularly Black women are represented on those shows, like, all the time, but whatever.
complain a lot, and it just sucks. Like I was saying, like it does do something to your head. And I personally feel like Black women are at the bottom of the barrel. Like nobody wants Black women. Like nobody desires Black women. They basically think we're trash. And
what? Like where are people getting this? This just feels like, I just feel bad for like people who feel this way about themselves, because there are plenty of people out there who love and desire, not even like Black women specifically, because that's kind of weird. Like what do you mean you love and desire just like specifically Black women, but like good people. And it doesn't really matter what your skin color is, or maybe they do have a dating preference or whatever, but there's plenty of people who value Black women and men. Plenty. And to think that you don't have that is just very strange to me. Very strange.
And she's a pretty girl.
Very pretty. Like she would have no trouble going out and finding somebody who would love and desire her. And I can't help but think that a lot of this is just, it's self-oppression. It's because of these narratives that you're being fed, and it's not a reflection of the real world whatsoever. In the real world, there are plenty of people who love, appreciate, admire, want to date, want to marry Black women all over the place. So you are so deeply entrenched in a narrative that this country hates Black women, or that media hates Black women, that you have actually brought yourself to believe that you are undesirable, and that other women who look like you are undesirable, when that could not be farther from the truth, especially if you're looking at media and entertainment. Like, did we just watch the 2023 Grammys? There's Black people all over the place, front and center.
that gets to your head, especially when you have a whole bunch of, you know, even celebrities, like men, Black men, like wanting to be with white women or lighter skinned women. It makes you feel like you're just not wanted. And it makes you feel like you want to join the hype.
Gosh, if you're basing your life off of what you see Black male celebrities doing and who they're dating, or what you see any celebrity doing with their life, that's your fault. That's on you. I do feel bad, but that is on you. If you are watching the TV and going, my life needs to be a reflection of what I'm seeing on this screen that I paid, you know, $299 at Target for. That's your own worldview. We're going to watch a little bit more, and then we're going to close out for today, because
we have made a lot of progresses in the campaigns. You do see a wider range of shades, but why is that all of a sudden a trend? You know what I mean? I'm happy it's happening, but I feel like this is something that should have been happening, you know? And also,
that's the place to end, I think, today. So when it happens, it should have been happening. When you do get representation, it's just trend representation. When it's not happening, it needs to happen. So no matter what, we're unhappy. is where I'm at in this conversation of not racism, but apparently colorism and skin bleaching and appropriation. Uh, you know what? It's all about framework, baby. What's the framework that you have laid out for your life and what is meaningful and valuable to you? And if colorism is somewhere on that framework, reassess, please, because you're gonna be miserable. You're gonna think the world is a much worse place than it actually is. There's a lot of freedom to be had in not worrying about these issues and going about your life and finding people who love and desire you, despite what your skin color is, and all of this, all these stupid superficial characteristics. There is so much more meaning to be found. You can spend the whole rest of your life chasing this dragon of colorism and trying to solve all the world's issues, or you could just do that and go about your life and look at the great, fantastic people who come into your presence and stay in your presence for the rest of your existence. And you will be much happier than I think some of these individuals are. Drop it in the comments down below. Like I said, colorism is real. It's something that I've experienced. I think it's something that most people on this earth have experienced because that's the way that humans are. We recognize patterns, we point out those patterns, and we point out when things are different from what we normally recognize. So drop your experiences of colorism down below. Do you think something needs to be done about it? And if so, what needs to be done about it? Please like, subscribe, click the notification bell to be notified every single time we post a new video for you guys, which is daily. And I'll be on the lookout for more Vice debates like this because there is plenty to be said on these different subject matters. I could run my mouth all day, and we still didn't finish this video. There will be more, guys. See you next time.